think that I'm already there. What's going on, everybody? We're getting ready to get started with this conversation. Yep, we're good. And I'll turn my volumes down because I don't know who's texting me at this. All right, here we go. So I think we're all set here.
All right.
Yep.
Ready?
I'm all set, Rob.
Hold on for a minute. So I change this thing around. I can have that. It changed on me. Okay, let's try this one more time. There. Okay, try it one more time.
Here we go. Good evening, everyone, and welcome to another edition of United Shades of Gray. I'm so glad that you guys have taken the time to tune in with us on today. Thank you for all of those who have been giving me your support. I appreciate the calls, the direct messages, the inboxes, the emails saying, hey, I heard you on the radio. We're liking what we're hearing. So today, our conversation is going to be, I have a great friend that I haven't seen in a long while. And as a matter of fact, while she was in the green room, we were just kind of catching up a little bit, and it was so great to see her. Dr. Gloria Morrow will be my special guest today. She is waiting to be to come to the forefront. I'm excited to have this conversation. We're going to be talking about being mentally and emotionally well. I want to ask the question, are you okay? Such a simple question, but has a variety of meanings and is very impactful in our discussion. Hey, you know how we do. I got my guy here, the Rob Father. He is the man that puts me in check, keeps me going, and makes sure that you get a well-produced show. Rob Father, why don't you give a shout out to the people?
What's up, Saginaw, Bay City, Midland, all points in between and throughout. Happy to be here.
He is happy to be here. That is a good thing, y'all, because if he was not happy to be here, I would be in trouble. So he's happy to be here on today. Hey, you guys are listening to United Shades of Gray. And if you guys are interested in getting involved with this conversation, I'm going to ask you guys to call in. You can call in at 989-752-6111. All right, it is time for what is hot off the press. I'm not going to take a long time with this segment of our show because we have an amazing guest on today in the person of Dr. Gloria Morrow. But I got to share this. First of all, there's a second vaccine that is on the way. We've talked about it before. Now Moderna is looking to get their rush order to produce their vaccine, which is 94% efficient. The efficacy rate is 94%. So they said in the next couple of days, should they approve this vaccination, that we should have an additional 2 million doses in the next couple of days. I asked you all the question, are you guys ready for this vaccination? Are you ready to take this vaccination? And the jury is still out for a lot of you that are out there. You have not said whether you are willing or ready to take this vaccination. I am so curious. Please drop.
Interject something.
Go ahead, Rob.
For the fellow veterans out there, check your email. There's been a message that came out to all the veterans that at some point all the veterans will be notified as to when the vaccine will be ready for them. They're going to start with the first responders there and the patients in the VA hospitals and what have you, all the nurses and doctors and whatnot. But then those veterans will be looked after as well. So,
all right, veterans, get ready. Get that arm out. Flex that arm and be ready for the vaccination.
And there are two now. One of them has two. You have to take the first dose and remember to go back for the second.
Absolutely, 2 shots. Now, and the one by Pfizer it has this code that has to be a certain temperature to receive it. I'm excited that people are excited about this. Rob, I'm a scary cat, so I think I'm gonna need a little reinforcement by seeing a few other people get this vaccination before I jump in line to get mine. So if all of you all get vaccinated, then I won't have to worry about doing so because you guys will knock out COVID and I'll stay healthy. So I'm good with that if everybody out there is cool with that plan. So yes, there is this vaccination taking place. So we're praying that this goes well and that all is well. But I got to get to some of the stuff that's going on. You know, we were talking on last week. The last two things deal with law enforcement. We talked about, are there issues of systemic racism? And in particular, on last week, we talked about law enforcement. Well, today is a conversation. The last two things that are hot off the press. Today in Houston, Texas, there was an ex-cop that held an AC repair guy at gunpoint over a false claim of having over 750,000 fake ballots in his van. And so he had been hired by this right-wing individual that's been working with the Republican Party. And he not only did he pull the guy over, hit the guy's van, jump out the car, put his knee in the guy's back, and hold him at gunpoint. And wasn't nothing in the AC repair guy's van, probably some coolant, maybe some wires. And so now this thing is going to court. This is absolutely ridiculous. But I think that as we have a conversation today, we are going to talk about mental health and mental illness. And are we okay? And I want to talk to Dr. Morrow as she comes in because we have lost our marbles in so many ways. And we need to get some real attention to what's going on, Rob. This is absolutely crazy. Okay, the next thing, and we're going to move right along because I want to get into this conversation with Dr. Morrow. The next thing that we'll be looking at is that I want to talk about a Chicago woman gets the surprise of her life. Those of you who are out there, the Chicago woman, she gets the surprise of her life when she's at home coming from a long day's work, and then all of a sudden she is her home is broken into by these officers. Their body cams are on, and this has happened actually in 2019, but we're only hearing about this because there was a case. CBS News actually released the footage of the body cam. And so it was a city versus CBS as to why we're actually hearing about this, because the court case has been now in session. And this woman is naked. You hear her crying, just crying naked as these police officers are going in. Turns out, once again, that this is a wrong address, wrong intel, wrong information, unsigned warrant for this type of procedure. This is, once again, the Breonna Taylor case happening all over again. The only difference is that they did not shoot this woman. We've got to begin to have a real conversation and really get into figuring out what is going on, because this is not acceptable. It is unacceptable for us to continue this type of behavior. Miss Anjanette Young, she was caught on multiple cameras while she's crying on the body cam, and it's all the wrong intel. There is a need for change, and there is a need for us to do something different. This is absolutely ridiculous. All right, so now that I've got that out my system, I can go on and talk about the things that are now at hand. I want to give a shout out to all of you that are watching in social media land as we begin this conversation, which I think is so important to have. And I am going to bring to the phone and to the stage, for those of you who are watching us via social media, my dearest friend, Dr. Gloria Morrow. She is a clinical psychologist, and she has been doing some fascinating things. Dr. Gloria, why don't you say hello to our United Shades of Gray audience?
Well, hello there. Thank you so much for having me. This is really exciting to provide information to the community. And Pastor, you are always at the forefront of bringing great information to the community. So thank you for having me.
Dr. Gloria, it is such a pleasure to have you. Just to give people some idea, I met you, I can't remember how many years ago. It was Wardeen Talley, who was the director of Max Systems of Care, was
Mhm.
doing a mental health training, and we were talking about cultural competency. And you were the phenomenal trainer that came in. And I was like, I don't want to do it. I'm not staying. I'm leaving after this first session. And you were like, just stay, see how it works. And went through the training, and you began to train, and you began to talk about mental illness, and you talk about biases, and you began to share this information, which I thought was so powerful and so important for us to discuss. And it was from there on, you like, Kareem, you can do this. There on, we just kind of hit it off, and every now and then we would touch and make a point of contact. Well, I've been seeing you doing some amazing things. Why don't you share with our callers, our listeners, some of the things that you've been doing, including the book that you wrote about men crying, and people don't understand that. But why
Yeah.
don't you share with us what you have been doing since then, Dr. Morrow?
Well, thank you again for having me. And I am a clinical psychologist, and I have been blessed to work with not only clients, and we call them patients in my current setting, because I'm the director of behavioral health for Unicare Community Health Center. And in my spare time, uh, I've always been doing cultural competency training, and now I'm also a consultant for diversity, equity, and inclusion. And especially after George Floyd, there has been a resurgence of interest in helping us to do what we should have already been doing. And so I have a lot of work that I'm doing now, trying to help people to build councils, have different organizations to really look at what they're doing in their organizations. And, systemic and institutional racism is huge and very difficult to address, but people are tackling that because, once you see something over and over again, you can't hide. And when we saw that officer with his knee on George Floyd's neck, there was no way people could
You
ignore
can't
that.
hide. You
You
cannot
can't.
run.
Yeah,
Now,
yeah,
Dr. Glory, you have a new, and I'm not sure if it's a podcast, radio show, video. I watched you live on social media, a brand
yes.
new meet with Dr. Gloria Morrow. Why don't you share with our listeners what exactly that is and how they may be able to tune in to hear you?
Well, thank you. So, a few years ago, I went through some life changes, and that's what I like to call them. And, at first glance, you can be just thrown apart and torn apart from these things happening. But I was reminded of who I am. And in that, I had to work on becoming brand new. And so, what I have done is I first started a Facebook Live series that I was doing every Monday. And then we decided to turn that into a talk show. And so it is being streamed on Facebook Live and YouTube. And all you have to do is go to my Facebook page, A Brand New Me with Dr. Gloria, and like my page, and you will see it, or go to YouTube, A Brand New Me with Dr. Gloria, and then visit my website, which is a brand new me with Dr. G.com. A brand new me with Dr. G.com. And you can learn all about what I'm doing as it relates to the show.
All right, awesome. Well, let's get into this conversation because, as we know, an hour goes by so fast when we're having a good dialogue. 2020 has been one for the record books. It has
Yes.
been a year of crisis like no other, a series of crises. We talked about the healthcare crisis, social justice crisis, George Floyd, and the other things that have incited since then. You mentioned another crisis that I had not thought about, which was the political crisis, as well as a mental health crisis. Explain to me what you mean when you talk about we are suffering or have been for a while dealing with a political crisis, and then how does that mental health crisis also come into fruition with everything else that's going on?
Yeah, well, we've been saying that we are in a pandemic. We've been talking about, of course, COVID-19, but I think we're having many different pandemics, and the political pandemic is one of those. For the past 4 years, we have been maybe 5 years, because even during the preparation for the election, we were thrown off course with the direction that we were seeing our government go in and watching some really scary stuff. I've often wondered about the mental health status of, some of those in leadership in our current government right now, and just looking at some of the um, delusional behavior. And, I have to, because I'm a psychologist, I have to think that people are not just mean spirited, that something has to be behind, their actions and their, uh, thinking. And so I've been watching very intently as I'm really concerned, even now, with us having a new president elect and the way we're watching our current president behave, it's really scary from a mental health perspective.
I want to ask a question because there have been a number of individuals in the political scene that have brought into question a possible need for a mental health evaluation as it relates to some of the behaviors we've seen by the current administration, and particularly the man in charge. Do you see any elements or something that one might consider to be signs of some form of psychosis or a narcissistic disorder or things of that nature?
Well, we've seen that all along. If you're coming from a clinical perspective, we certainly have seen signs and symptoms of narcissism and also, delusions of grandeur. And I think without trying to psychoanalyze this person that I have never met or sat with, I won't try to do that. But I would say when we talk about the leader of the free world, we should always make sure that that person has good mental health because, they have access to a little button, that can dictate the whole world. And so I think that we've watched a very complicit government go along with his shenanigans and his behavior and have not checked him, and I think that's really dangerous. And that's what government, I learned this in junior high, about checks and balances. And we have those in place for a reason. So if somebody is not performing in the way that they should be, or they're not behaving in the way they should, we have checks and balances for that. But if the government is also complicit and they're acting just as impaired as he is, you have nobody who's able to check.
Where is the sane adult in the room? Can somebody please stand up?
Absolutely.
Okay. Doctor, okay, so this year, this pandemic, the lockdown, really, let's talk about this lockdown. And I heard someone say that there has been an increase in terms of the mental health issues, 20 to 30% increase. Divorce rates have increased. How has the lockdown and how has that impacted so many individuals' mental? Were these issues already there, and this the lockdown just being the straw that broke the camel's back, or are we all experiencing some form of mental illness because of the separation anxiety?
Well, I'd like to say that we probably all are experiencing some level of stress. And then some people who may be more at risk or more prone to mental illness may actually have more exacerbated symptoms because of what they are going through. You got to remember people use going out of town, going out to hang out with friends and family as a great outlet, to help
Sports.
to overcome. That's right, sports, everything to help you to kind of manage your anxiety and your stress. And they don't have that. So the other thing about couples, you could do pretty good if your spouse is, gone to work, or, you all are separated for a while and then you come back together. But if you're sequestered together the whole time, if it's a healthy relationship, it could probably be fine. But if it's not healthy, then we also are seeing an increase in domestic violence because now these folks don't have any way of getting out. And then we see our children who are really suffering because they're used to being at school with their friends, but they're also performing poorly academically because parents that are not as educationally savvy as some parents, they aren't able to help their kids as much. And so kids are not getting the same academic support. And let's just face it, some kids are getting their meals at school, getting their socialization, and even their parenting at school. So it's just bad.
Dr. Gloria, what advice would you give? Since we're talking about this lockdown and the pandemic, and you've kind of gone down the path of this virtual learning, what advice would you give to a parent who is like, look, I'm over this virtual learning. It's not working for me. It's driving me crazy. And there's some that have excelled. But what advice would you give to a parent during this? And we're not in a complete lockdown, but in this need for social distancing, in terms of making sure that their children are emotionally well.
Well, the first thing is that we have to provide outlets for them to have some type of social interaction. So even setting up Zoom meetings with them and their friends where they just have fun and they can still laugh and get together with their friends. But also parents are going to need to rely on that educational system when their kids are struggling. They have to call, even if they have to go all the way up to the superintendent's office, because the educational system is still supposed to provide that support. Irregardless to what we're doing virtually, they still are responsible for making sure kids learn. And I think a lot of parents have not accessed the principal, or after talking to the teacher and that hasn't gotten you anywhere, you still have some other rungs to climb. So I would go to the principal. If that doesn't work, go all the way up to the superintendent's office, because when you do that, they're going to have to respond. And I think that's the thing that has to happen. And then you've got to get your kids out. We can't socialize and congregate, but you can take your kids out for a walk, or you can take your kids to the beach or somewhere where they can get some exercise and see something different. I think once you look outside and you see things that are still the same, that reminds us that everything has not changed. And so you have to remember that there are some things that you can do, but they need to get moving. They need to have exercise. Don't let them sit and play on those games all day long. That is not healthy at all.
Okay, so if there are some of you that are out there and you're having questions, because what I've learned is that there are many times questions that we're having and we're harboring those thoughts and ideas, and we never get an opportunity because we don't know who to go to ask those questions. If you're out there and you're suffering in any kind of way, you're dealing with how to cope with the loss of a loved one, you're trying to figure out, how do I deal with this whole issue of seeing everyone, my friends. I know in our community, Dr. Moore, unfortunately, it started way out on the west side of the state out there by you guys. COVID did, and then it was all the way on the east coast in New York, and it
Yeah.
seemingly here in Michigan has gotten closer than it was in Detroit, and it is now all around us here in the city of Saginaw. As a matter of fact, the city in which I live here in Michigan is experiencing double the percentage of affected infection rates as the entire state of Michigan, which is already off the charts. So if you're out there and you're suffering from COVID or any of the other issues that we're dealing with, mentally, emotionally, not sure, anxiety is setting in, I want you guys to give us a call at 752-6111. We have the doctor in the house, and we want to be able to utilize her services as she is here. All right, Dr. Morrow, when we begin to talk about mental illness, now we talked about all of the things that separated us on the course of this year. We've talked about George Floyd, we've talked about the violence, we've talked about politics. All of those things separate us. But one thing that we all have in common is that we all need to be emotionally and mentally well. When I say the term mental illness in the Black community, it means you crazy. Black people don't go to the doctor. Black people aren't sitting on a shrink's bed and having. What do you say to those individuals that may be listening that are saying, you know what? How in the world do I get help and overcome the stereotypes of what mental illness might mean into their particular communities?
Well, if you are suffering because of emotional situations or mental health challenges such as depression, anxiety, PTSD, or even substance use, then if you aren't seeking help, then you're crazy. Okay. Help is available. And I think that, yes, we have dealt with the stigma of mental illness historically for a lot of different reasons. The same reason that people aren't comfortable taking the vaccine in our community because of the atrocities that happened to Black people historically. But you've got to know that help is available. There are people who may look like you, who understand your worldview, that are providing services, and you need to get help. Because if you're not getting help, not only are you going to be more vulnerable, because we do know that people who deal with mental illnesses that are untreated can sometimes suffer from physical health challenges and even spiritual health challenges. So if you don't get help, you're going to be sick and you're going to make everybody around you sick. So
Doctor,
I would say stop suffering in silence.
okay, we're going to talk about suffering in silence. You brought up the issue of substance abuse. We're going to talk about this right after our break. We'll be right back with more United Shades of Gray.
United Shades of Gray will continue on WSGW.
All right, we're continuing this conversation in just a second. Rob, do we need to take a quick break real quick, or are we good?
2 minutes.
All right. So those of you who are on social media, we are still going to continue. We can continue this conversation. And then as they come back in and we get back into our radio vibe, we'll pick it up right there. I want to hold off on the issue of substance abuse because I think that that's something that's really important. But as we look at this, Dr. Morrow, what are some of the key signs? And I'm probably going to have you repeat this if you say something that you knock out of the park on this. What are some of the key signs that people need to take a look at? Really, I might need to talk to somebody.
Okay. When a person is sleeping too much, sleeping too little, eating too much, eating too little, crying all the time, sometimes they're angry and irritable, can't focus, can't seem to find balance, then that person may really be in need of talking to someone. If the person is having thoughts that people are out to get them or feeling paranoia, if they are having thoughts of hurting themselves or hurting someone else, then you do need to get some help.
Well, Dr. Morrow, I often have signs of have thoughts of hurting someone, but I get what you're saying. And when we talk about like how much of this, because if we say, I have those thoughts, but when we talk about these things and how they play out, is it something that has to be consistent? Is it, or if I think about this now, I need to move, or is it something that is persistent that we need to look at? How do we begin to determine what's just my gut reaction and when there is truly a problem?
Well, if you have a history of feeling that way,
Oh, hold on. Our producer wants us to hold that one for the conversation for the radio. All right, so we're going to hold that. We're going to break it. All right.
Stand by, doctor. Working. There we go. Button came off here. All right, let's start this right here.
You're listening to United Shades of Gray on WSGW.
Hello, this is your host, Kareem Bowen, and we are back with more United Shades of Gray. While we were on the break, those of you who are listening to us on the radio, we certainly appreciate you. But we also have, while we're here, a conversation that continues. There's two shows, the one that you hear on the radio and then the one that you catch on social media. We were just in the process. I asked Dr. Morrow, really, how do we understand when we are depressed? What are some of those signs? And she kind of gave us when we're sleeping too much, when we're doing things in excess that we are not typically doing. I guess would be a good way to look at that, Dr. Morrow.
yes. Also, when you stop enjoying things you once enjoyed, and if you're going through this for a period of 2 weeks or more, then you might want to seek the help of a trained mental health professional.
Okay, so and then I asked the question, and I think this is important. How do I know if this is really something that I need to seek help on, or is this particular thing just something that, is just my feeling is in the moment? How do I differentiate between the need of really going to get help and me just kind of having a moment?
Well, I believe people who may already suffer from some type of mental health challenge and they have a history and you've been doing okay, but now you're starting to feel this way again, you need to immediately go back and start, investigating that. But if people haven't been, if you are consistently feeling this way for a period of 2 weeks or more, where it's interfering with your daily functioning. And that's the key, where something is really interfering with your daily functioning. So you're at work and you're, telling everybody off, you're having a more difficult time, you're absent more often, you're just staying home, wanting to stay in the bed. Then it's time to get help, because I always tell people to check first organically to make sure there's nothing organic going on, because the same thing can happen with thyroidism or diabetes and some other disorders, physical disorders, can have some of the same symptoms. So you can always check with your medical doctor first and then make sure that you rule out any organic problems. But then if you don't have any organic problems, then it has to be something to do with your mental health.
Okay, I want to talk. You brought up something to me, and I've been using this since you shared it with me, Dr. Morrow. I talked to you about all of the things that were going on, and we talked about how our frontline workers, our grocery store attendants, our restaurant workers, and especially our doctors and physicians, nurses, have all been experiencing a great deal of mental trauma. I can't think of any other way to call it. And you brought up the concept of compassion fatigue. And
Hmm.
ever since then, I've been saying, I think I'm suffering from compassion fatigue. This
Well,
is my diagnosis.
recently, I think a month ago, 2 months ago, a doctor committed suicide because of stress.
Absolutely.
You know,
And so we see a lot of this happening. Please share with our listeners what is compassion fatigue, so that they can understand that, we don't understand what this edge is that we're feeling, but it's actually a real thing. Share with them what compassion fatigue really is.
Well, it really kind of mirrors almost PTSD. It has to do with that secondary trauma. So you may not be the one who actually experienced the trauma, but you're helping people who have. And it's also called the cost of caring. When you care about people, it's easy for us to develop compassion fatigue and not know we have it. We just know we aren't sick, but we are tired. We're just tired of being confronted with the trauma. And I've seen this as I'm watching people on the news from the various hospitals who are working with patients, trying to help them. Being, a doctor who usually will turn over certain things for the nurse or someone else to do, such as notify the family or let the family come in to see. They can't. So now they are sitting after they have treated the person. Now they have to be the one that lets them say goodbye to their family. So that's creating a lot of stress and maybe even flashbacks, all kinds of nightmares. Things may be happening for them in a greater way.
It's interesting that you say this, because I'm looking now, and it's been interesting having conversations with my white counterparts, who are not experiencing what we are experiencing in Black America, not to the degree that we are, in
Mhm.
terms of how it is ravishing through our communities. I can tell you, probably within the past 7 days, there's probably been a good 4 or 5 individuals who have passed away. Maybe another 10 individuals that we know are now positive and are actually managing and suffering with COVID-19. When we look at the impact that it has on our entire community, what would you say to our seniors, those who are considered high risk of catching and being severely impacted by COVID? What would you say to them that they should do in terms of keeping their mind in a good place, because this thing can drive you crazy. When it first started, Dr. Moore, I was going to the store and I had on gloves and I had a mask on, and I didn't want to be around anybody. It was like I was dodging breaths of air. I was losing my mind. It was really driving me crazy. And I had to take a moment and say, look, I can't do that. I can't do this. And I had to figure out a better way of managing this. What do you say to those individuals who are saying, I really don't want to get this, but you don't want to drive yourself crazy? How should they handle this particular virus?
Yeah, and you mentioned seniors, so I'm so happy you said that. And the great thing about seniors, so many are resilient. They have already been through so many things, and especially if seniors have faith, then they're going to rely on their spiritual source at this time. And so that's the time to do that. And if they have children or grandchildren, help them to learn how to get online so that they can communicate with their family. For example, Thanksgiving, we weren't able to all get together like we normally do. But we were in our separate places for dinner, but then we had a dessert time on Zoom. Everybody brought their dessert and we just laughed and talked and had fun, on a Zoom call. So if they have children or grandchildren that can walk them through that, that will be really helpful. Try to exercise if they're mobile, where they can walk or move around. Try to stay moving. Moving is helpful to your emotions, and it helps to mitigate against depression and anxiety. And then last of all, see how you can help, because sometimes you may be able to make a phone call to somebody who's suffering or in need, and that will help that senior to feel useful. I think right now people need to feel useful. And when you are helping others, it helps to take away the focus on yourself.
Doctor, I think this is very good. I know for me, I'm thinking through some things as we're talking. And one of the issues that I've heard talked about is I have a relative whose children are athletes. I mean, they're sports athletes. One plays football, the other plays basketball, and they are really going crazy in the fact that their children are not being able to play sports. I'm looking at seniors that are great, that are graduating with their senior year of
Yeah.
sports, on the table. What do we say to these athletes who are used to doing exactly what you're talking about? They're used to moving, they're used to playing, they're missing the competition, they're missing all of this that's going on. What do you say to them to help them keep their sanity? And Rob, I think we might have someone that's calling in. What do you say to someone like that?
Well, I think we have to say to them, like to all of us, this too shall pass. I think we have to keep reminding people that this is going to get better. And for our young people, you've got to get them out there on the courts. They may can't play together, but they can practice and they can still work out. And that will help them to feel better, even if they're just out there by themselves practicing, because it's important for people to keep themselves moving. I've been encouraging people, get in your car, drive by the ocean, drive by the lake, do something to give yourself a different set of scenery, because if not, you're going to go stir crazy. So get out. It's okay. Nobody's going to get in that car with you. You can get out there and explore and get some fresh air and get to see something different. And we have to tell our young people that as well. And some of the churches have been doing some wonderful things. They've been creating virtual graduations, virtual celebrations, and helping the young people to at least have some
Okay,
sense.
we lost
That's what call back.
Dr. Gloria. She was right in the middle of the point. Doctor, if you could please call back. We're here on live and somehow we lost her. I think it's something we did in the studio.
That's okay. We have a caller. We have a caller to respond to.
All right, we have a caller. So we have a caller that is going to come in. Rob, do we have the caller on the line now?
We're ready to go.
All right, we're going to have our caller really quick, and I think the Dr. Gloria is going to be calling us.
She's back.
All right, you're back, Dr. Gloria.
I'm
All
just
right.
talking.
Okay, I'm not hearing you now, Dr. Gloria, but we're going to work. Okay, thank you. I think we got her back. This is the anxiety that I have here, Dr. Gloria. Help me with my anxiety. I'm a control freak. I want things to be right, and we, things happen with social media and technology.
Yeah, things happen.
Okay, so Robert, did you say you had a caller that was calling in for Dr.
Yeah, we have her now.
All right, we're gonna take a caller really quick, Dr. Gloria.
Oh, you need to turn your radio down. Turn your computer down.
It's
Turn your computer down. There you go.
okay.
Okay.
Who's this calling, please?
My name is Vivian Rankin.
Do you have a comment for the show?
Yes, I do.
All right, Vivian, how are you doing today?
I'm doing great.
It is so great. It is so great to have you. Now, you are, I know Vivian, and you work in healthcare. So, Vivian, what is your question or your thought or something you'd like to share in this conversation? Do you have a question for Dr. Gloria?
Well, it's more of a comment. I have been really enjoying the conversation, especially regarding compassion fatigue. And as a retired nurse, I'm no longer actually on the front lines, but my colleagues are on the front line. I have family members that are on the front line. So I think that this is the population of people that kind of get left behind, those of us who have retired. And we're watching from the sidelines, just really praying and believing for the safety and the health of those that are still on the front lines. I've seen a lot in healthcare as a retired nurse for 40 years, but nothing of this magnitude. So, it's a lot of anxiety in terms of those that are actually out there on the front line. So we can't forget about us, the ones that are watching and really praying for the best. When the vaccines were delivered, it was just a blessing because I remember Vice President Kamala Harris saying help is on the way. So help has come. So I'm really excited about that. I just wanted to make that comment because I think that's kind of like a population of people that are forgotten.
Well, I think that's a great comment and something very important. Dr. Gloria, since we have Vivian here and she's representing the healthcare community, our first responders, those who are on the front line of defense, what would you say to them? Give them some pointers on how they can just kind of make sure that mentally and emotionally they stay healthy. What are some things that they need to do as healthcare workers, frontline workers, to stay healthy emotionally and mentally?
Well, one of the things that is very true for healthcare workers, they are very committed, even like the caller who is retired now, but still committed to serving. And so oftentimes they serve without any thought of themselves. And right now, you do have to exercise self-care. They have been required or asked to work long shifts, sometimes not taking breaks, and sometimes not even being asked to do it, but volunteering to do it just because of the great need. But you can't help anybody if you're sick. And so I do think that people have to pay attention to their own mental health and, just be able to say, it's okay to not be okay. And today I am not okay. And I think that starts a conversation for them to, be able to step back for a few moments to give themselves a chance to practice mindfulness and to breathe and to rejuvenate so they can get back into the trenches.
Wow, that is so important. As a matter of fact, and I'll share this, I am also a pastor, Dr. Gloria, and it has been really one of the most challenging years as a leader in the faith community. We have seen a need, first of all, what we consider the most important thing is disseminating the word. We've seen a transition for us out of our places of worship and still having to find a way to successfully make sure that people are well emotionally, that they're being spiritually fed. And then we're also having to deal with the issues of those deaths, not being able to be physically present. I tell you, as a pastor, that is one of the most challenging things on the planet. I had a memorial service today, and to have to remain physically separated and distant and not being able to comfort in the way that we're used to is a challenge. And then having to lose the loss of life has been so significant, and trying to encourage other individuals. I had a moment where there was one young lady who was a part of our ministry. She wasn't just a member, but she was also a friend that passed away, young woman. And I had to say what you just said. I had to take a moment. And I don't think that we are thinking about everything that is going on and how this impacts us on such a high level. For those who have lost individuals, and it may be the COVID or even just suffering from grief, how do we begin to pick up the pieces of our lives after such tremendous losses that we experience?
Well, you've got to give yourselves permission to go through a healthy grieving process, because if not, you will never get to a healthier place. And sometimes, we just kind of keep moving. We keep it all moving. We survive this, we just jump back up and we start running again, and, all is well. But I do think we do need to pause. And in fact, I think that's part of what this has all been about. We've all had to pause and reset. And you've got to give yourself a chance to do that. And whatever that means, does it mean taking off the job? Does it mean having some downtime where you can kind of reflect on what's happened this year? Whatever that looks like for you, take that moment or that time to kind of reflect and pause so that you can then reset and recalibrate, because I think we've all been brought to that place of having to do that.
Well, there's another element of this that I would really like to talk. My family always says, "You talk too much. You don't have to say everything that needs to be." But if it needs to be said, and I'm praying and I'm present, I'm usually going to say it, Dr. Morrow.
All right.
This year, the issues, and this goes back to our mental health as a people of color, as people, African descendants of slaves. We have seen George Floyd, and like you said, the nation could no longer turn turns their head away. We have seen this year George Floyd, other issues, just Breonna Taylor, the entire system of governance and justice really be at odds with our community in a very meaningful way. This Kyle Rittenhauser, superstars paying to get him out of his current situation for shooting these protesters in relationship to the things that are going on. Black people are tired.
Mm-hmm.
We're tired of seeing the injustice that takes place in our community. We're tired of seeing our sons and daughters be slain like cattle and livestock. How do we begin to navigate and explain where we are while we are tired of having to explain, if that makes sense? It's necessary to say how we feel and where we are. But let's be honest, I'm tired. Being Black in America is traumatic in and of itself. How do we explain that to the rest of the world who don't understand where we are and where we're coming from?
Well, I think, first of all, we have been trying to explain it to the wrong people. I think that we have been suffering a long time from acute racism reactions, such as racism related frustration and fatigue. We're tired of that because it hasn't really gotten us anywhere. And then good meaning white folks will come and want us to educate them. So either they can feel better or they can feel more informed. And we're tired of that. So here's who we ought to be talking to. We've got to be talking to one another. We've got to find a way to help in our community. We just saw us rise to the occasion, and we got President-elect Biden in that White House. We stood up, and if we could stand up for that, why aren't we standing up for the issues in our community? We need to pull our resources together and stop fighting amongst ourselves about who the leader is, and let's do the work. you know, and I always tell people, well, I can't change the system. No, but you can feed one person or a family, or you can help house, make sure a family's not homeless. There's so much that we can do. We have resources, and we need to pull those together, because I think we're trying to convince, you know, the greater world about our plight when we should be doing the work.
Okay, how do we begin to have those conversations? One of the and you'll understand this. We've been talking, as I said at the top of the program, we've been having these conversations. Does systemic racism really exist? Does it exist in our institutions of America? And I think the thing is, we want people to understand, yes, it does exist. Yes, we are hurt. Yes, we are harmed. And like you said, sometimes we have that conversation with the wrong individuals. But when we have these conversations in the community, how do we begin to move past the hurt to healing so that we can begin to do some of the things that you just addressed?
Well, we have experienced what we call racism wounding, and we do have to heal. And I think that's the first thing that has to happen before we can start, you know, congregating, because I think it's because of that brokenness and because of those wounds that it's even hard for us to trust one another. So I think we have to start with healing because of what has happened to us historically. You know, in fact, Dr. Joy DeGruy has this wonderful concept called post-traumatic slave syndrome, that we have historically, you know, been traumatized, and then generationally traumatized. And so because of that wounding, it makes it difficult for us to even engage with one another in a healthy way. So I think we do have to have our churches and our, you know, leaders to come together and just say, we need to have some time of healing for our community so that we can get on the same page and create a national agenda for people who look like us.
Okay, Doctor, we only have 2 minutes left, but if there was something, because a large part of the population, the makeup of this audience, is what we would consider white or suburban, non-Black America. Okay, what is it, if we could, in a minute, you could take a minute and say, this is what, when we talk about healing and we talk about healing races, we talk about coming to a place of understanding. What is something that you would like them to be able to chew on until our next conversation?
Well, first of all, I would like to let you know that you should become a real ally. And what an ally does is educates oneself. You're not looking to Black people to educate you. You go and do your own work. But then you also have to acknowledge, embrace, and extend your white privilege. Because until you do that, you will have no idea of what is going on or what has happened in our community and what our needs are, so that you can then confront your biases and your own stereotypes that you hold for our community, and then do your work to make things better. That means don't spend money in places that discriminate against us. You know, make sure you're supporting those activities that help to benefit people of color. So just do your work, you know, and we need you to help us. So do your work.
Dr. Gilmore, this has been a privilege and an honor. If you could, in this last minute, tell us how we can get in touch with you. What is your website, your YouTube station? Let us know how to get a hold of you.
Okay, so go to A Brand New Me with Dr. Gloria on Facebook. Go to A Brand New Me with Dr. Gloria on YouTube. And please visit my new website. It's A Brand New Me with Dr. G.com. A Brand New Me with Dr. G.com.
As always, it is certainly a pleasure. And to those of you out there, mental health is not a destination. It is a process. It's about how you drive, not where you're going. I thank you guys for tuning in. Come in next week for more of United Shades of Gray. Until next week, grace and peace.